This is Fit to Succeed in partnership with NordicFitnessEducation.com with host Ben Pratt.
And I did this with like 30 clients. I'd hook them up with electrodes, have them do 20, 30, 40 different exercises. And then I'd print out this nice report and I'd analyze the heck out of it. And I'd go, wow. I had some clients that got not much glute activation at all during abduction movements, and others that got through the roof.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fit to Succeed show. Now, today's guest I have been trying to get on the show for quite a few months, and I'm really pleased to welcome to the show the Glute Guy known as Bret Contreras. Hi, Bret. It's good to speak to you all the way from San Diego.
Yes, thanks for having me, Ben. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been really keen to try and get you on ever since you published your book called the Glute Lab, which I believe is named right after your gym. And I've been trying to find a way or an angle, and perhaps this coronavirus malarkey has opened up a window in your time to allow us to speak.
Yeah, you just have to be persistent because I'm the worst. I'm so bad with emails. I hate them. I've just over the years, I just don't check as much, but you were persistent and you nabbed me.
Well, I'm really pleased, and it's kind of nice actually because I'm talking to you from your own little gym today, and we're going to talk quite a bit about strength conditioning, about glute training, and a few other key topics I'm sure that you will divulge a little bit more.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to start off with just something a little bit brief, but if you had 1 or 2 minutes to explain to people why your training methods help to offer the best results for developing strong and functional glutes, what would your answer be?
Well, I would just say, look, there's no one in the world who's put more time into learning about the glutes, and no one even comes close. I kind of started off the niche. I'm the glute guy, and now it's funny. I follow a lot of these guys on Instagram, these glute experts, but I'm kind of like the grandfather, like the guy who started off all of it. And people love glutes, and they love learning about it. But before me, the only exercise that were popular, you either had in the weight room, and all the bodybuilders said, just do you don't have to, they never even said glute day. They just had leg day, and you did quads and hamstrings, but your glutes just developed along with it because you did your squats, you did your lunges, you did your stiff leg deadlifts, you did your back extensions. And a lot of people get nice glutes that way, but you don't maximize your glute development that way. Mm-hmm. When I came along, I invented hip thrusts. So people would do like body weight hip thrusts and glute bridges. Mm-hmm. It's more of an activation exercise or a physical therapy exercise. Well, I came around and started doing loaded hip thrusts, but I also kind of made it okay. Like a lot of the women would say, like, I like the abduction machine, or I like cable kickbacks, and all the guys would be like, that's stupid, just squat. And I came along and said, no, squat and kickback and do the seated hip abduction machine and do your hip thrust. Do a variety, like that's what they all do for all the muscle groups they like the most. And it's so stupid to hear these guys say just squat. And then they'll do 14 arm exercises. They'll do 14 bicep exercises. And then they're telling women to just squat. They don't even practice their own advice because women care about their glutes. So they're naturally going to learn a lot more about glute training than most of the men who don't care about their glutes, or who are taking steroids and their glutes just grow huge because they train legs and they just grow along with it. So I would say that, I put a lot of time and energy, not just with training myself, but with training thousands of other clients over the last couple of decades. And then also I have these folders of glute research, thousands of articles. I mean, I go on every week of my life, and I pull up the new glute articles, save them, categorize them, and I stay current on the research, and I've even published original research. So that's why, and my book Glute Lab really delves into everything. It's really comprehensive, and I'm very proud of it. But I don't think there's a more comprehensive system out there, not even close.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. That's a very thorough response. And, I've been on Amazon and seen how many reviews you've got at 5-star, and clearly the book has kind of become the Bible of glute training. And I totally agree with that.
Bible, people are calling it, but I took 2 years of my life writing that. I mean, I wanted it, and I'm so glad that I partnered with Victory Belt, who they let me kind of have my own they just gave me the reins. Like, what other book publishing company would have let me make it 606 pages? I don't even know how they make a profit off it. Here in the States, it's like on Amazon, it's like $36. The thing's 606 pages of high quality paper. I'm like, that's a steal. So I'm so glad that it's like that, because, you know, my goal, I like being popular. I like making money, but my biggest goal is for my methods to spread around the world. And so this way, you know, I've just seen over the last, you know, couple of decades, more and more people. Now I go into any gym, it's like they're all doing my exercises, you know, and I love it. It's just, I've been fortunate enough to have, you know, to come in a time with the, came up in a time where the internet allowed me to, with social media, allowed me to reach so many people. And there's now the methods have spread worldwide.
Yeah, fantastic. I appreciate that. Now, I wonder if you wouldn't mind perhaps just sharing us the origin story of how you became known as the Glute Guy. Was this a nickname that you chose, or did other people attribute that name to you?
You know, I was at a Perform Better seminar, and I was talking to my colleague Martin Rooney, and Martin's like, you know, he was so interested in the glutes. So he'd be like, what about this exercise? Is this good? What do you think about this exercise? And we talked for about 45 minutes about the glutes. And so afterwards he goes, you know, you should have a nickname. You should call yourself the Glute Guy. And it made so much sense. But funny you bring that up, because I want to make a Instagram post about this. You know, the saying, I think it's something like, luck is where opportunity meets preparation, or something like that. I say I'm very lucky, but I have so many of the ideas throughout my career came from other people,
Right.
but I was in a place, I was smart enough to pay attention to them. When I came up with the hip thrust, it wasn't using a barbell or a bench. It was using, I put my back on the glute ham developer, the rounded pad. I put my feet on the reverse hyper, and I had a dip belt with plates hanging underneath me. And it was amazing. But then it took me actually a couple of years to come up with the barbell hip thrust just using a bench.
Right.
And I always felt it would work better having both your shoulders and feet elevated. And it, you know, puts a bit bigger stretch on the hamstrings. It's more range of motion, more, you know, overall distance, the barbell distance or barbell displacement. But anyway, when I was, you know, I was going to write a T-Nation article on this hip thrust exercise where you needed a glute ham developer, a reverse hyper, a dip belt.
Oh, really?
And I'm like telling my client at the time, I was like, she was my aunt actually. And I'm like, you know, she had seen really good results. And I'm telling her, like, I came up with this awesome exercise, but you need all these things and it's dangerous. What if like they split apart as you were doing it, and then you fall down and you could hit your tailbone on the floor? It would just be catastrophic. And how many people are going to actually do this? She goes, well, it sounds like you need to invent something. And I was like, well, I can't invent. I'm just a former math teacher and personal trainer. Like, I don't know how to invent stuff. She goes, sure you can. Draw it up right now. And we did. So she came up with that idea. Then I go to patent this idea. And my patent attorney, I had sent him this EMG experiment conducted by ACE. It's in 2006. It's ACE Glutes to the Max. There's a PDF of it. You can Google it. Well, it had an EMG report on all these different glute exercises. And I had showed him it. And my patent attorney says, why don't you just figure out EMG? Why don't you learn EMG and do it yourself? And I was like, why don't I? That's a good idea. So I just Googled like EMG companies. Now, Naraxin is probably the biggest supplier of EMG equipment. They happen to be a mile away from me.
Oh, wow, really?
Their headquarters a mile away from me. What are the chances of that? So they trained me on how to use their equipment. And then Martin Rooney came up with the Glute Guy. My clients, Sammy and Aaron, came up with the name Glute Lab. You know, Booty by Bret, like so many different things over the years. I know there's a lot more. There's a lot more that I'm not thinking of, but the Glute Squad, the Glute Squad, where the girls start calling themselves that. It's like all my little nicknames and all my things that I have are, you know, other people giving me good advice.
Well, and that shows how important it is to listen to other people and to when the universe, I guess, gives you a nudge in the right direction, that you follow that through.
Yeah.
I wonder why do you think that shaping and strengthening gluteals has become such a popular topic in recent years? Because to be honest, if I go on social media, we follow a lot of fitness individuals, and I see glute hip thrusters and band walks and all kinds of stuff related to glute training. It's almost endless in the feed. Why do you think it's become so popular?
You know, I think it's a combination of, I think I had a lot to do with it, but also, you look at like this, it used to be every girl, when I came up, it was every girl wanted to look like a Victoria's Secret model.
Mm-hmm.
Really slender, super lean, they looked amazing in a bikini, but then kind of with clothes on, they looked really, really skinny,
Mm-hmm.
but that was, every girl wanted to look that way. And then now the thicker, like the Kardashians came along, uh, and even Instagram really changed things because, you'd have, I think the first was Jen Selter, and then now there's a million of them, and they're just so good at posing. It's like they have these skinny waists, these huge butts. Now I know surgeries and like Brazilian butt lifts and butt implants have become popular, but I just think it's making this awareness. Like that's what when I first started blogging, I always put pictures of big butts on my blog back in the day because I wanted to inspire women to like, look, this can happen. Back then, no one thought you could actually transform your butt. And it has a lot to do with genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Some girls start training their glutes, they're very disappointed. Other women, 6 months later, they're like, they look totally different. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. There's so much variance. But anyway, for guys, think about it. I mean, I can like look in the mirror and go, I like big traps. I like big delts. I like big biceps, triceps, pecs, lats, glutes, quads, hamstrings, calves. Like I would love to have some more muscle on every single body part. But a lot of women, they just want to be lean and then have some glutes. They just want bigger, like shapelier glutes and then be lean. And when they get lean, they tend to look the way they want. Like, it comes down to like what the majority of people want to look like. And a lot of them, glutes signify like athleticism, and they're just right now it makes people feel sexy, or women mostly,
Mm-hmm.
women like it more than the men. And so, but I'm
Well, that does raise a thought. Sorry for interrupting there, and that is obviously that you're a man and you are training mostly women. I guess that's your target niche. Do you get many guys interested in developing glutes and working on that as part of their training focus?
No, and it's funny because when I started training people, I thought I was going to train men. I'd always worked out with, I'm a bro. I'm a total bro, like total meathead. Just have a PhD. I'm like a meathead with a PhD. And so when I started training people, I just thought I'd attract all these male athletes. And my first equipment that I first purchased was all like from Elite FTS. I bought this reverse hyper, a glute ham developer, this power rack and platform with all the bells and whistles. I had specialty bars, a competition bench press, a sumo 45-degree hyper, a prowler sled, I had all these. It was such a cool, all the attachments on the step. It's like a step up attachment, a box squat, camber bar, safety squat bar, all these different hex bar, all these different tools. And I announced that I'm going to start training people full time because I was a teacher, a high school math teacher, doing part-time personal training. And I worked at a small studio to kind of learn the business side of things. And then I just said, I'm going to do this full time. And it was always my women, my female friends and family members. They'd be like, oh, I want to train with you. And I'd go, I don't know if you'll like it. It's a lot of like athletic equipment. And they'd go, oh, I love training like an athlete. And I'm like, I had them pushing the truck. Like after the workouts, I'd get in my truck and put in neutral. They'd push me up and down the cul-de-sac, and that's and then they told their friends, and then they told their friends, and it's all word of mouth. I wasn't even on the internet back then. I wasn't on social media back then. And then I opened up a studio in Scottsdale, and it's like right when I opened up, I remember one client, her name was Leslie. she was responsible for referring 13 different clients to me.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
and then they'd refer people. It was always women telling other women about me. And so it just happened.
Right.
And even now it's funny, like I have just a couple males who train with me. And then a lot of women get annoyed. They're like, Bret, how come you never post before and after pictures of men? I never get sent before and after. Men don't take before pictures.
True.
Have you ever taken a picture of your glutes in the mirror? Like, me neither. I don't do that. But it's funny because women, before they start lifting, they just have a hunch. Maybe I'll want this down the road. They take a picture, and then down the road, they take another picture, and then they can compare the two. Like, people always want to see my before, like my transformation. I don't have a single picture like when before I had glutes. I wish I did. I'd love that. It'd be so cool. But have not found a picture. So I remember I used to be like, okay, for my blog, I want to be equal and like, or not, at least somewhat equal, and have just as many male butt pictures as female butt pictures or transformation pictures. And I remember doing a search, and it's all like underwear ads and like just, or like raunchy stuff. Like I could find a million pictures of women, but not men. So it's definitely that women are more into glutes, but I am proud that more men are too. More men are doing hip thrusts, and men, like, this is I'll delve into another topic, but I don't try to have men and women train glutes the same way. Theoretically, the men should do what the women do, but first of all, women I found can tend to handle more volume on, than men. We tend to push our sets harder, go closer to failure. So if you don't go as close to failure, if you use shorter rest times, you probably need to do a little more sets to make up with it. I think that's why women can do so much volume. The men will rest 5 minutes in between sets. I mean, that's what this morning, that's what I did. I did 3 sets of hip thrusts, but I went, I did a Nautilus glute drive, 560 pounds for 20 reps. Then 650 pounds for 10 reps. Wow. And then, it's like I'm breathing so hard, it takes me 5 minutes to feel recovered for my next set, and it wipes me out. But
do you think there's something to do with fiber type, like muscle fiber type, and why women can take more volume than guys?
Natural tendency. Well, first of all, I think women, the estrogen is protective against muscle damage. Right. But also it comes down to the style and preference. A lot of them like their heart rate being elevated, and they focus more on, like, they love their volume. And so they might do 5 sets of every exercise, and they might do 5 sets of 6 different exercises, and they're doing like 30 sets in a workout. And I try to get people to be more moderate with that. But what's interesting is, according to the research, a muscle grows best with 10 to 20 sets. Like my buddies are the top researchers in this field. My good friend Brad Schoenfeld, James Krieger. James will tell you 12 to 24 sets per muscle group. And then these women are doing 30, 40, 50. The women with the nicest butts. So either A, they're doing something wrong and could have even nicer glutes if they did less volume, or B, we need to study what they're doing, and because they're doing it just right and we're wrong. And that's how I came up with my rule of thirds. My rule of thirds kind of was to explain why they get away with doing what they do, why that's optimal for them. Right. And the rule of thirds, there's 3 components to it. It's like, okay, first, a third of your exercises should be roughly 1/3. It's never exact, but around a third should be vertical hip extension exercises like squats, lunges, deadlifts, good mornings. A third of your exercises should be horizontal hip extension exercises like hip thrusts, glute bridges, frog pumps, back extensions, kickbacks, reverse hypers. Okay. And then the remaining third should be lateral or rotary, like abduction movements, seated, standing cable, extra range sideline hip abduction, sideline hip raise, things like that, all the band work.
Right. Okay. So like frontal and transverse plane stuff in the remaining
abduction, right. And so the reason why that's important is because the vertical, they take you deepest into the stretch. They have the biggest eccentric component. They create the most muscle damage. If you try to do 30 hard sets of lunges or just squats and deadlifts, like, you'd be beat up. But the hip thrusts don't work you in the stretch as much. They're more of an end range. They don't create as much muscle damage. The lateral exercises are, it's like using bands, you don't even work the muscle in a stretch at all. So you can do more volume that way. They don't create as much muscle damage. Now, the other component is that around a third of your sets should be heavy, for lower reps, a third moderate for medium reps, and a third light for higher reps. And that just tends to, allow for more variety. You can get more volume that way. Not every set is super heavy. It's not as jarring on the joints. Not every set is super light to where you feel like puking. So like there's a good mix of things. And then the last component is around a third of your set should be to failure. A third should be 1 or 2 reps shy of failure. And then a third should be kind of nowhere close to failure, and a lot of the band work and high rep work, you stop when you're burning really bad, but if someone had a gun to your head, you could always get 5 to 10 more. Whereas that can't be said with heavy barbell exercise. Someone can't put a gun to your head and get 5 more. You're done. You just can't do anymore. So that rule of thirds, I think, is a really good rule of thumb. And think about it. With glutes, we train the glutes with hip extension, hip abduction, vertical hip extension, horizontal hip extension, frontal abduction, transverse abduction, and external rotation. We train and posterior pelvic tilt. We train the glutes.
Cover all the movement patterns.
Yeah, you don't do that with other, like you kind of do it with delts, but like delts, think about it. Because I always like to think the delts are like the glutes for the upper body.
Yeah.
So you can do lateral raises, front raises, rear delt raises, but you can do them with a cable column to kind of accentuate. If you want to position it somewhere, you can kind of accentuate the stretch region versus like end range. If you do dumbbells, it's kind of hardest at the top, in the shortened muscle position. But you can kind of do things to kind of target different. Then you can use bands to really just work the end range, So you can use bands, cables, or dumbbells to kind of work different areas. And you've got your big compound movements like your military press, your shoulder press variations, but then you've got your upright rows, you've got your front raises, your side raises, you've got your rear delt raises, which you can use the reverse pec deck, you can use dumbbells.
There's lots and lots of variety for sure. And I think what you're touching on there, Bret, is that it's so obvious that people do lots and lots of variety in the upper body. Is it so quick to come up with all the exercises, but quite often on the hips and the glutes, they tend not to do much variety, as you've well explained. And all these different exercises you've listed off has kind of made me think about what you mentioned earlier about going and buying an EMG machine. I wonder, could you just identify from your own research and using EMG and testing muscle activation, what 2 or 3 exercises have you found to create the maximum amount of gluteus maximus activation?
Well, it's heavy hip thrusts are number one. It's all horizontal hip extension exercises. So heavy hip thrust, heavy back extensions, and then like heavy kickbacks. Like I do my kickbacks. You can do kickbacks off the cable column, but you can also get underneath a reverse hyper and use that pendulum to do kickbacks. And those were always the top 3. Now, if you said, what are the top 3 best glute exercises? So those would probably be the top 3, but I would still say you've got synergy. Pick one horizontal hip, pick one of those because they're all horizontal hip. So pick one of those, then pick one vertical, a squat or a lunge or Bulgarian split squat or step up, and then pick one lateral because you'll end up working different fibers and
for sure
potentially targeting different fibers and maybe even stimulating through different mechanisms. So
I really like that sort of rule of thirds and how you've pitched that across. But I wonder if there's another side to this, because as a researcher, doing things like testing muscle activation informs you in one way, but you've also trained thousands of people over the years. Do you find a difference in which muscles create the greatest activation versus the ones that people adhere to and the ones that they enjoy the most?
That's a good question. So first of all, what doing so much, because, all right, you can read EMG studies and that tells you the averages. What I liked doing is I'd hook a client up, and I did this with probably 30 clients. I'd hook them up with electrodes, have them do 20, 30, 40 different exercises. And then I'd print out this nice report and I'd analyze the heck out of it. And I'd go, wow, I had some clients that got not much glute activation at all during abduction movements, and others that got through the roof.
Wow.
And the ones who got low activation, they'd be like, I've never liked these abductions. I don't, and their form is good. It's just their body. I've had other,
So are you saying things, sorry, you said that their body, sorry to interrupt again. I'm just trying to get clarity for the listeners. do you think it's something to do with postural position? You know, whether somebody's
No, I think
pelvic
it's
tilted one way or the other, or
I think it's something to do with their hip anatomy.
right?
You know, their glutes are in a good position to, well, the glute medius has to do hip abduction, but the glute max, it's kind of like the moment arms change and they're different on different people, but
Mm-hmm.
they happen to feel their glutes a lot doing this, but other people not so much.
Mm-hmm.
You look at, you know, loads. Some people get, like me and my client Sammy, our glute activation went up and up and up as we went heavier with hip thrusts. My intern Andrew and my client Aaron back in the day, they topped out at like a 20 rep max for hip thrust. Their glute activation didn't keep going up as they went heavier and heavier. So some people really like lighter hip, you know, lighter loads with hip thrust. Other people kind of like doing a pyramid and going heavy a couple sets, maybe going back down. But then I remember my client Sammy she got higher glute activation doing 50-pound goblet squats compared to 185-pound barbell squats.
Wow,
She got higher glute activation doing 106-pound kettlebell deadlifts compared to 205-pound barbell deadlifts.
Wow.
So but not everyone's like that. My point is that everyone is so individual, and that's what a good coach and trainer does. They really pay attention to the client, and the client says, and what I learned is whenever a client would say, I feel my glutes more when I turn my feet out, or when I go wider. If I do wide stance glute bridges, I feel my glutes a lot more. I test them and they'd get way, way higher glute activation. They were usually right. So I always try to expose my clients to a lot of movements and positions and then ask them how they feel it the most. And then I I take their word for it and program that.
Yeah, that's. I think that's really wise. You know, the power of not thinking that you know it all, and that there's a real need to listen to the client and to work with the feedback that you're getting from them. Now, you mentioned earlier that you obviously spent a year in New Zealand and you went out there and did your PhD. I wonder if you wouldn't mind maybe just sharing a short summary of what your research was about and how that perhaps has influenced your practice.
So, God, I can't even remember the title of my thesis, but it was like, I won't even try. But basically it looked at, you know, like squats versus hip thrusts. And, you know, I looked at EMG and, you know, the movements themselves and kind of broke them down, and then looked at the way they transfer to, you know, to performance. And I did a lot of cool things. It's a really cool PhD thesis. So, you know, I'm proud of it because it was the first series of studies looking at barbell hip thrusts. But it also, like, one of the chapters was like, are all hip extension exercises created equal? You can Google that and get the PDF of that. That's just a published article in Strength and Conditioning Journal. I also made a YouTube video on it. But like this idea of different torque angle curves, I'd never seen anyone do that before me. Like I'd never seen anyone address that. And also like little things like I had I figured out, you know, to use a force plate. Everyone uses a force plate for vertical tests, you know, the isometric mid-thigh pull. Well, I said, what if you use it to stand on it and like push against a wall as hard as you can and look at the horizontal force.
Right.
And I did a twin experiment looking at what gives you more maximal horizontal force capacity. Is it squats or is it hip thrusts? And according to this, you know, this is like anecdotal, it's just a case study, but the hip thrust was way better at it. So it's transferring to horizontal pushing power or pushing force. So that would require another study with using a good sample size, but that's very interesting nonetheless. So there are a lot of novel things about my thesis.
Nice. I appreciate you sharing that. I wonder, you know, that it's interesting. I think not only have you really pushed and promoted this hip thrust exercise, but you actually, you know, have done the research in the lab yourself and published one of those early papers on it. So I'm assuming then that particular PhD thesis that you did has had quite a significant impact because you continue to develop and promote, you know, that particular exercise.
You know, I'm not religious. I'm not spiritual. I could use some more spirituality in my life probably, but when I thought up the hip thrust, it's crazy because I've never done anything like this. I went into my front yard I was all alone. It was probably, like 10 o'clock at night. And I went into my front yard. I looked up into the sky, it was dark out. And I looked up at the moon and the stars and I went, holy shit. From this point forward, my whole life is going to be my whole life has changed. I did one set. And I said, my whole life has changed. From this point forward, my whole life is going to be dedicated to promoting this awesome exercise that I thought of, and
Nice
and it's now going on. I think it's going on 14 years or 2006. So yeah.
Well, you've had an influence. I see it all over the place. Loads of people doing barbell hip thrust these days. Now it does, that kind of leads us quite nicely into another thought process. And that is that the world of personal training, and most likely the world of strength conditioning as well, is a constantly changing world. It's not fixed. Things that we thought were right, 15, 20, 25 years ago when we both started in the industry have now been turned on their heads, and different perspectives have been thrown out there into the industry. Now, you have previously shared in today's podcast actually about your drive to constantly read and to research. You say that you dedicate time every week to doing that. What changes perhaps have you made in more recent years because of research that you've read in the journals?
It's always evolving, and that's why you got to be flexible with your beliefs. You see these personal trainers in the commercial gyms and they still dress like the 90s. It's like you see them wearing their fanny packs and their their giant like tank top, like their tank tops with a huge cutouts for the arms, and it's like, and you see them training the way they're like and I'm not trying to bash them, but seriously, think about all the professions out there. You can be a lawyer, a doctor, a counselor, a therapist, and you can and a personal trainer where you just get your certification, you do the bare minimum to pass, and you never stay on top of the research. And 20 years later, you're still practicing and you never learned a thing. You never cracked open a book. You never read a journal, a single study. You never went to a conference, and you just kept training people the same exact way. So that person doesn't have 20 years of experience. They have one day of experience repeated for 20 years.
Yeah, good point.
And conversely, you can be a new trainer who tries all sorts of new things and have 3 years of experience and of trying new things and tinkering and experimenting, and you might have more knowledge than the person who's been training people for 20 years because you're reading and learning, and that's just the way it is. And so there's a lot of things that I've learned. Ben, remember telling people, and I used to love telling people, like, do high intensity interval training so you're burning, burning the metabolism for you're revving the metabolism for 48 straight hours after the workout. And okay, the epoch is a little overrated with HIIT. Like, it's not going to make this huge. Back then I thought it was like the biggest deal ever. It's like might increase 10% more. It's not like you can eat like crap and then just do HIIT. Your diet is more important, and we remember when we used to tell people, like, you want big arms? Do squats and deadlifts, because squats and deadlifts jack up your testosterone and growth hormone, and these things travel throughout your bloodstream, attaching to the androgen receptors all over your body, and they get your arms big, your shoulders big, they'll get your whole body big. If you're not doing squats and deadlifts, you're not going to maximally grow any body part. Mm-hmm. And I love telling people that. Well, we were wrong, Stu Phillips was the #1 guy who started coming out with all this research saying, look, yes, you do jack up your testosterone, your growth hormone, but they have nothing to do with the growth of your biceps, for example. They don't grow your biceps. It's the local thing. Whatever you're doing to the muscles locally, that's what responds. Mm-hmm. And then even the high reps and low reps debate, even when I first started writing on T-Nation and on my blog, I didn't think that, I thought you had to go heavy. That's why I thought of the hip thrust. I'm like, I like these glute bridges, but I could do 100 of them. Mm-hmm. I need to do heavy. It always had to be about heavy weight. Well, now we have about, back then there were only a couple studies, but now there are like, I'd say 25 to 30 studies on the topic of heavy weight versus lighter weight. Mm-hmm. As long as you kind of go, do hard sets, you can grow muscle just as well. Mm-hmm. You
So you're saying it's about the intensity of effort, whether it's high rep, high volume, or it's lower rep, heavy weight.
Well, okay, if you do, like we have a study showing, me and Brad, you're doing 3 sets of 3 doesn't grow your quads like doing 3 sets of 10 squats. So you'd have to make up for it by doing a little more sets.
Right.
So maybe you'd have to do 5 sets of 3 compared to 3 sets of 10. So you have to adjust the volume a little bit. So I think the most efficient way to build muscle is probably like the 8 to 12 rep range, you know, because heavyweight tends to beat you up and you have to do more sets. And then lightweight makes you want to puke, gets you nauseous. And that's the thing. People think, oh, lightweight to failure is brutal. Doing a set of 30 squats or deadlifts or even hip thrusts to failure.
Horrible lactate. Horrible
Especially when you're doing like rest pause at the end, we're like breathing like crazy and eking out another few reps. Like that's brutal. A lot harder than people think. So that's why 8 to 12 is, 6 to 15, that's your sweet spot.
Nice.
But yeah, there's a lot of things, and you always have to be open-minded, and there's so much we don't know, so much it's so hard to study a lot of these things. So you got to be open-minded and, and flow with the research, with the science, try new things as a trainer. Yeah.
I find that really refreshing, Bret, that you're somebody who's out there who, whilst you're well known for a specific type of training, the fact that you have, come up with this law of thirds or this rule of thirds, and it's all about variety and varying things up, and that you have also explained really well today that it's so important to listen to the client. They can feel what's going on in their body, and we need to be able to listen, learn, and coach them, not just repeat information that we've learned over the years. I find all of that really refreshing, and this idea that ongoing learning all the time in order to maximize the coaching ability that you have. I think that's really refreshing. It's great to have somebody like yourself who is singing that particular tune quite loud. So I appreciate that. Now we're kind of coming up on time, but I wonder, is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't yet covered in the remaining couple of minutes?
I mean, I can't. I'm good at responding to questions, not thinking of things on the fly. There's so many interesting topics out there. And I just, one thing that I've been thinking of lately is just how things have changed in my lifetime. So Ben, I know you can relate to this. It's like, and before us, things were a lot different. Do you remember reading about, I think it was like, could be wrong here, but the book Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, we had to read that in high school. It was a classic. And this Pip, I just remember this guy Pip was in it, but I think he did. I think it was that book or something. There's a apprentice. I remember learning about apprenticeships. Back in the day, you wanted to learn a trade. You wanted to be a blacksmith or a tailor or a whatever, locksmith. You had to learn the business, and you learned the business by being an apprentice for someone where you worked for 3 years unpaid. You were that guy's. You were that guy's little robot working for them for 3 straight years without getting paid. And guess what? After 3 years, you learn the business. Now you can go out and make money for the rest of your life because you know the trade. All right. Nowadays, what I've seen is, these people these younger crowd, they're just so impatient. They would never go work unpaid for 3 years. They're all so darn impatient. So darn, there's this entitlement out there, and it's hard, and trust me, I get it. It's like, I hear it too. So-and-so's making X amount of money. Did you hear this guy? They're making all this money off their TikTok videos. This person's making a fortune off of their 30-day challenges. And I hear all of it, but you can't do it all. Number one, like me, I don't have, things I've never done, and I'm probably the most successful strength coach in the business, right? Like in terms of followers and revenue that I generate and stuff like that. But I don't have an app. I don't have an app. I know
a conscious decision.
Yeah, I know some people. I have a friend that makes several million a year off the app, and I don't understand the apps. I don't use that many apps. I just don't want a headache. What if I get one developed and it sucks? So I don't have an app yet. I don't do 30-day challenges. I don't create a lot of ebooks. I have another friend that does a ton with ebooks. I have another colleague that has his academy. I don't have an academy. but you know, it's like you look at what you're good at, what you're not good at. It takes time to understand, and that'll change over time. Like, as you can tell, I'm a good talker. That's why I'm doing this podcast right now. I like doing seminars and talking. I should do more seminars, but when I'm not as good of a writer, I'm a slow writer. It takes me too much time. That's why I partnered up with someone to write Glute Lab with my buddy Glenn Cordoza. But you can't do it all. You got to figure out what is kind of this blend of what the market demands and pays, you know, money, and then what you're good at, and then what you enjoy. It's this blend of that. And so what I will say to the younger aspiring personal trainers and strength coaches and physical therapists who you trust me, we all know of these people who make millions online. And for me, like, I had to do it through educating people, because I'm a decent looking guy, but I'm no Greek god. I'm not, you know, people don't follow me because they want to look at my beautiful body. You know, I have like a kind of a dad bod. I'm all hairy and getting older now. I'm not eye candy. They follow me because I know my stuff. I'm an innovator. I'm an educator. You come to my stuff week in, week out, and you're going to learn. Well, guess what? I had been personal training for 10 years before I ever wrote an article and before I ever got on social media talking about this stuff.
That was your apprenticeship.
Well, it's different now, because if I had Instagram and back before that, I would have started. So, sure. but keep in mind, there is something to be said for when I came on the scene, I blew up because I waited, I was patient. And so now I see a lot of people, it's like I've had people work for me, and it's like, you know, 3 months in, they and every time I tag them, they get 1,000 new followers. And it's cool, it's exciting. And then they start looking at their followers and they're like, oh my God, I'm at 10,000. I could, you know, and you get greedy. And then you're always hoping your boss tags you, and then you're running ideas by your boss. And now you start caring more about your business than the boss's business. And you're being paid to learn. You have a paid internship, and it's 3 months in, and now you're annoyed at the boss because he's not helping your career. And it's like, wait, you work for me. And then you get fired because it's you create headaches for the boss instead of helping him. I mean, that's what I see a lot of the youngsters out there. They're too impatient. If you worked for me for 3 years and did everything I told you to do and read everything I told you to read, and, you know, subscribe to my 4 colleagues' research reviews and read the studies I sent your way and followed me around during Glute Squad and asked me questions and watched the way I do all my businesses, you would be set for life. You know, you would acquire the knowledge to be set for life, but no one seems to do that anymore.
Sounds like an attractive proposition.
Well, my last trainers, you know, they were strength coaches for a couple of years. I mean, at the university they worked for, and they learned so much. You get paid nothing. That you do for the knowledge, and that gave them a leg up on the other personal trainers. So
I bet
you got to put in the work, and you have to be patient, because you don't deserve to be crushing it right out of the blocks. You don't have the knowledge. You know, I see people faking it. Some of the women that I work with, and they're like, you know, they start working out and 3 months later they're fitness experts online, doling out advice. And the way they come up with ideas is like I come up with ideas by looking around and training people. And I'm like, oh, this client is struggling with this. Oh, that I should make a post about that. They go and they read someone else's and they repurpose it.
Yeah.
And then you can read and you can tell they don't really understand what they're talking about. So my whole point in this is have patience and do your due diligence before coming out the gates. It'll pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. You know, that there needs to be an eye on the longer game, not on the quick fix. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, is that right from the start, you need to be sure that you're building a career that you can establish and that can serve you for a long time, rather than I might just dabble in personal training for a year or two. And I think those bits of advice that you shared really attest to that.
And it's like, I mean, we didn't have Instagram where you have your link tree and your, you know what I mean? We didn't have we had to actually get clients like through word of mouth and through, we had to go door to door back in the day and put flyers up. You know what I mean? Like you didn't have the internet to actually
Remember it well.
grow. Yeah, so it was a different world. But nowadays you can strike it rich and make way more money, but you'll never make that much money if you don't develop the expertise. So that's what I'm trying to tell people. Like, I look at my colleagues. Brad Schoenfeld is arguably the world's expert on muscle hypertrophy. Like I would say he's this combining there might be some guys who know more than him on different aspects of the detailed physiological aspects of things, but they don't have the applied knowledge. But he is so curious about it. He's so passionate, and he's conducting studies and reading research, and he still lifts weights, and he has training partners, and he's just immersed in the field. He's the world's expert on muscle hypertrophy, and he can now travel all over the world doing what he loves doing. But he put in the 20 years to become the expert.
Of course.
Same with me with glutes. I became the world's expert on glutes because I'm more passionate and curious about the topic than anyone. You do that, you become the world's expert on something, then you're unstoppable. But it doesn't take 5 years. That takes 20 years,
Definitely. The power of having that clear niche for sure, and working hard at it for time. I totally agree. Bret, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, and to have a chance just to pick your brain. I really want to express my thanks, and I'm sure that the listeners will really benefit. We will, of course, link up with your website, with your book, and also with those couple of other articles you mentioned during the call, so that readers can find that. Really appreciate it, and I want to express my thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, and I hope your people enjoy the podcast.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share via social media. You can also rate the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. If you'd like to know more about us, then check out our range of online courses at www.nordicfitnesseducation.com.